The high school gymnasium pulsed with excitement. Folding chairs filled the polished floor, rows upon rows occupied by proud parents, siblings waving handmade posters, and teachers bustling about with clipboards. The air carried the scent of carnations from the bouquets, mixed with the faint squeak of sneakers on the varnished wood. Outside, the June sun burned hot against the parking lot, where cars lined every space. And down the concrete walkway leading to the gym, a young black student named David Carter walked slowly, his cap balanced carefully on his head, the tassel brushing his cheek with every step. He carried a single sheet of paper, folded twice, and smoothed so many times the creases had nearly vanished. It was his speech, words he'd written late at night under the glow of a desk lamp, words he hoped would capture everything his classmates had been through. David's gown, a deep navy blue, swayed with each stride. Though pressed and spotless, he kept tugging at the sleeves nervously as though he had to remind himself it was real, that he had earned this moment. From the open gym doors, laughter and applause spilled out, the muffled sound of the band warming up echoing under the rafters. Families streamed past him, arms full of flowers and cameras, chattering in cheerful anticipation. Nobody paid him much attention. He blended into the tide of caps and gowns. But to David, each step carried weight. He thought of the years of late-night studying, the sacrifices his family had made, the nights when exhaustion nearly swallowed him whole. All of it had brought him here, to this single doorway, where his voice at last was meant to be heard. Clutching his speech, he drew a steadying breath and stepped toward the entrance. His heart thudded with nervous excitement, not knowing that his biggest test had yet to begin. The gym doors loomed just ahead, sunlight glinting off the glass as David reached for the handle. But before he could step inside, a broad arm shot out in front of him. "Hold it right there." David froze. A uniformed security guard stood planted in the doorway, his stance rigid, his eyes narrowing as they swept over David's cap and gown. "This area's for graduates only," the guard said flatly. "You need to head around back with the rest of the families." David blinked, confused. "I am a graduate," he said, his voice careful, steady. "This is my ceremony." The guard's frown deepened. He folded his arms across his chest, as if bracing himself. "Don't play games, kid. You don't belong in here. Where's your ticket?" "My ticket?" David's brows furrowed. He held up the paper in his hands. "This is my speech. I'm supposed to—" But the guard cut him off with a sharp shake of the head. "I don't need stories. I need proof. You think just throwing on a cap and gown makes you part of this? Not today. Move along." A couple of parents walking by slowed their steps, glancing curiously at the scene. One tugged her daughter's sleeve, whispering, "Why is he stopping him?" David's chest tightened. He clutched the folded speech a little tighter, fighting the sting of embarrassment. He tried again, his voice firmer this time. "Sir, my name is David Carter. I go to this school. I'm supposed to be here." The guard snorted. "Sure you are. And I'm the principal. Nice try." He stepped forward, his bulk filling the doorway. "Now," I said, "move along." Behind them, the joyful buzz of graduation carried on unchecked. But for David, the doorway to his moment of triumph had turned into a wall. David stood firm, the folded speech trembling slightly in his grip. His voice, though quiet, carried conviction. "I'm telling you the truth. I've gone to this school for 4 years. My name's on the program. Please check the list." The guard let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Kid, I've worked here long enough to know who belongs and who doesn't. You're not on any list. You probably just snuck that gown from somewhere." The words stung like a slap. A couple of parents standing nearby exchanged uneasy looks, while a group of students in their own gowns hesitated at the steps, whispering. David's heart pounded, but he held his ground. "I didn't sneak anything. My family's inside. My teachers are inside. I'm supposed to be here." The guard's voice rose, sharp and dismissive, carrying across the crowd. "Enough lies! Don't make this harder than it has to be. You don't belong here, and you're not getting in." Heads turned. Conversations quieted as more people began to notice the standoff at the door. Mothers with cameras frowned, fathers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. The spectacle was too raw, too charged. David felt the heat of humiliation rise in his cheeks, but he didn't move. He straightened his shoulders, gripping his speech tighter, as if the paper itself could anchor him against the tide of disbelief. "This is my graduation," he said, his voice steady despite the crack threatening at the edges. "I've earned the right to walk through those doors." But the guard only smirked, taking a half step forward. "Not today, you haven't." The crowd's silence grew heavier, pressing down on David like a weight. And yet, even in the face of dismissal, he refused to step aside, because he knew the truth, and the truth was about to find its way into the open. The security guard's voice grew sharper, echoing down the entryway. "I said step aside, boy. Don't make me call backup to drag you out." David's grip tightened on the folded speech, his knuckles pale against the dark gown. The guard's words cut deep, but he forced himself to stay rooted. His heart thudded in his chest, his jaw clenched with quiet defiance. A ripple of murmurs passed through the gathering families nearby. Some looked away uncomfortably, unwilling to intervene. Others leaned closer, whispering in disbelief. "Is he serious? That's a student. Why won't he just check?" David swallowed hard, his voice low but resolute. "I told you, I belong here. I've worked too hard, come too far, to be stopped at the door." The guard scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain. "Save your speeches for someone who will believe you. You're not going inside." He stepped closer, towering over David, his hand hovering near his radio. "Last warning. Move away from the door before I remove you myself." The humiliation burned hot in David's chest, but he refused to back down. His eyes locked on the doorway, the cheers and music from inside drifting faintly into the tense silence of the crowd outside. This was supposed to be his day, his moment. Parents pulled their children closer. Students in caps and gowns stood frozen, clutching their programs. The air was thick with unease, every second stretching longer, heavier. David lifted his chin, steadying his breath. Though his hands trembled, his voice came firm, cutting through the whispers. "If you put me out, you're putting out one of your own graduates." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The guard's jaw tightened, but he barked louder, trying to mask his unease. "Enough! I don't care what you say. You're not getting in." And with that, the standoff became the center of attention. The once celebratory doorway to graduation had turned into a wall of humiliation. But David refused to let it end there. The standoff at the gym doors had turned into a spectacle. Families filed past in hushed silence, stealing glances at the scene while pretending not to stare. Some shook their heads, others whispered behind cupped hands, and a few simply frowned, unsure what to do. Among them, a group of graduating seniors slowed, their tassels swaying as they clutched their programs. One girl tugged at her friend's sleeve, whispering, "That's David, isn't it? He's in all the AP classes." Another nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, he's top of our class. Why's the guard stopping him?" The murmurs spread, students recognizing the face behind the cap and gown, even as the guard barked at him like an outsider. Still, no one stepped forward. Fear and uncertainty held them back. Nearby, two teachers exchanged uneasy looks. Mr. Palmer, the history teacher, leaned toward Mrs. Lopez, whispering urgently, "That's Carter. He's one of the best students we've got." Mrs. Lopez clutched her gradebook to her chest, her brow furrowing. "I know. I've graded his essays. But the guard's not listening, and nobody's stepping in." Meanwhile, David stood his ground, shoulders squared, clutching the folded speech so tightly it bent against his palm. His silence carried more weight than any argument he could make. The crowd shifted restlessly. Parents craned their necks, some muttering their disapproval. "Just let him through. He's clearly a student." Yet none dared challenge the guard directly. The tension grew heavier with every passing moment, thick enough to choke the air. All eyes remained locked on the boy at the doorway, and the man blocking his path. And then, above the rising unease, the sharp crackle of a microphone rang out from inside the gym. The principal's voice boomed through the speakers, announcing the start of the ceremony. Within moments, the truth was about to walk straight into the light. The crowd's uneasy murmurs were suddenly pierced by the squeal of the PA system. From inside the gym, the principal's voice carried deep and steady through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as we prepare to welcome our graduates. And in just a few minutes, we will hear from our valedictorian. The words froze the air outside. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the families and students clustered at the entrance. All eyes flicked back to David, still standing tall, still clutching his crumpled speech. The gym doors swung open and Principal Harris stepped out, microphone still in hand, scanning the restless crowd. His eyes landed on David immediately. Relief and recognition flashed across his face. "David," he called, his voice booming. "There you are. We've been waiting on you." Gasps erupted from the onlookers. The guard stiffened, his arm lowering uncertainly as the principal strode forward, clapping a proud hand on David's shoulder. "For everyone's clarity," Principal Harris said, turning so the crowd could hear, "this young man is not only one of our graduates, he is this year's valedictorian." The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Families who had whispered in doubt moments ago now broke into applause. Students cheered, some shouting his name. Teachers stepped closer, nodding proudly. The guard's face drained of color. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. His earlier certainty crumbled in the face of the truth made undeniable. David, though, didn't smirk or gloat. He simply straightened, the weight of humiliation sliding off his shoulders. His folded speech, bent and wrinkled, seemed to glow with renewed purpose in his hand. The same doorway that had been his barrier seconds ago was now his passage, opened wide for him to walk through, not in shame, but in triumph. The applause swelled, filling the entryway with a warmth that pushed back the sting of humiliation David had endured only moments before. Students clapped and cheered, parents rose to their feet, and teachers nodded with pride as Principal Harris guided David toward the open doors. David took a deep breath, the folded speech still clutched tightly in his hand. With each step he made toward the stage, the sting of the guard's words faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of respect. The guard remained frozen by the entrance, his earlier bravado gone. His eyes darted away from David's, his jaw clenched in silent shame as the young man he had tried to block walked past him without a glance. The crowd's applause was not for him. It was for the student he had dismissed. Inside the gym, the scene was electric. Families waved signs with David's name, classmates patted his shoulder as he passed, and the band struck up a proud march. He walked with his head held high, no longer a boy begging for recognition, but the valedictorian, the voice of his class. When he reached the stage, Principal Harris leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Carter, this year's valedictorian." The audience erupted. The cheers thundered through the rafters, rolling over David like a wave of vindication. He unfolded his speech, the creases still visible, and laid it carefully on the podium. For a moment he paused, looking out over the sea of faces, classmates, teachers, his family, and even those who had doubted him. And then, steady and sure, he began to speak. The gymnasium quieted, every ear straining to hear the words of the young man who had fought just to walk through the door.